Good afternoon. So if it's the last 8 hours or so, we have heard about shippers, carriers, brokers, we have heard about freight, we have heard about mobility. Let's hear about the truck now. It's been about 123 years ever since the first truck rolled out of Daimler in Germany. And my clicker is not working now, so if it can help. There. So I would say about 102 years ago in North America, the first truck came out in the form of Ford Model T pickup, which was the first truck. And ever since that time till about very recently, the question was, here's a truck that I've bought as a fleet owner or a vehicle owner. So here's a truck I've bought. What do I do with it? Do I use it for long haul, short haul, regional haul, city haul, pickup and delivery? Those were the kind of questions truck owners used to wrestle with for the past 102 years or so. Now in North America, there's a new change happening, a tectonic shift is happening where people are buying trucks like these, but not for the consideration that was dominant earlier. Now the question is, here are the services a truck needs to provide. What can it do for me, right? It's a big change. So the services being it needs to run in an urban environment, stop and go traffic, last mile delivery, just-in-time manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. And there are so many different requirements. Noise regulations, parking regulations, emission regulations, et cetera. What can this truck do for me? And what that really means is when trucks are sold now, and very soon in the future you will see more and more evidence of this, is when the truck will be sold, it will be sold with a promise, with a book of business, that the moment you drive that truck off the dealership, that truck is will be generating revenues for you from that very moment on. And that's how the fundamental business model of trucking is evolving and changing. And all the things that we have talked about today since morning, all of those considerations are already baked in this business model. And it's coming. It's already happening. Few OEMs that are global in nature are manufacturing their trucks in a way that that possibility now becomes real. So I'm going to talk about the 8 most transformational shifts that are happening in the heavy-duty trucking industry. And I'll go through each one of them in detail. Obviously, no prizes for guessing all day. You've heard about this. Digitization is the most dominant, pervasive, and important megatrend in our industry. So I won't spend time on that. You already know about it. Autonomous trucking, very, very important. That's another very important shift that is happening because that will have cascading impact on all corners of our industry because it changes the fundamental nature of what drives the truck. You heard from Pronto's Anthony Lewandowski earlier today. It basically will create a new business model where the driver does not remain the driver anymore. The driver will be taking off a lot many more different responsibilities in the future, some of which will actually have profound implication on fleet productivity, fleet efficiency, and fleet effectiveness. So we're going to talk about that as well today. Rise of value trucks. So those of you who have traveled to emerging markets, you have seen in the past 15, 20 years, low-cost trucks were driving majority of growth in those markets when it came to truck sales. Here in North America, we have been used to what is by global definitions considered to be a premium truck. So we had on one side low-cost trucks, and on the other side we had premium trucks. There was a void in the middle. But now if you go to markets like China, India, et cetera, you will see a new breed of trucks emerging in these markets. These are called value trucks. So a little bit bigger engine than what it used to be in low-cost trucks, a little bit more comfort and convenience, better safety, better telematics, better human-machine interfacing. These trucks are now the major growth driver for truck sales in emerging markets, which is great news for us here in North America because once we design our trucks here, we can design once, test once, and now sell all around the world. And that gives us that opportunity, the rise of value trucks. Another thing, platformization. So back in the day, so for example, Daimler, which is the biggest OEM in the world, would claim we are the most global truck manufacturer. And their definition in the 90s or before that of a global truck OEM was that I will make this truck in Germany and sell all over the world and claim it to be a global truck. those days are behind us now because of the rise of Brazil, Russia, India, China, those markets. Now what Daimler soon realized is that model cannot hold. So what they started to do is started to manufacture these trucks in these parts of the world. And what they quickly realized was that something was not right because they were selling these trucks, but the margins were not very good in these markets. So what they have done now, all the major global OEMs, is now they have global platforms, which means that a Freightliner Cascadia looks awfully similar to a Mercedes-Benz Actros if you go under the hood, although the architecture is different from the outside. So there's more and more of platformization happening. And in the future, you will see more and more of service platformization, which means the same telematics solution or service promise that a Daimler Trucks offers in North America will be the same in Japan, will be the same in Africa. And that is where platformization is going. Urban trucking, no prizes for guessing. Urbanization is a major trend. And we are now seeing the rise of urban trucking, which means trucks that are specifically designed for urban shipping and delivery. These are also called city trucks, trucks that carry freight for last mile logistics in densely urban areas with unique requirements. So this is a new breed of trucks that are coming out called urban trucks, facilitating urban trucking. Beyond brick, that's another very important tectonic shift happening. I talked about Brazil, Russia, India, China, but those are not the fastest growing economies anymore. Now we have the next set of countries coming into that space called next 11 countries. These are countries like Mexico, Vietnam, Turkey, these kind of markets. So this is where more and more focus is shifting now in terms of product planning and designing for global markets. And then as a result of the economic growth that has been experienced in many Asian markets, we are seeing the growth in Asian OEMs. Now, they're not attacking us here in North America. They are attacking us where the willingness to defend for North American and European OEMs is the least. These are markets such as East Europe, markets such as Central Asia. These are the markets where most of the Asian OEMs are now going in and creating strong footholds. And nearer to our shores, you can see the evidence of that in Brazil, where a lot of Chinese and Indian OEMs have now entered that market in the low end of the market, but they're creating unique positions there, and eventually they will grow from there. So we've got to be careful around that. And finally, from a retail perspective, we are seeing the evolution of the dealership. If you had seen a dealership's balance sheet about 10 years ago, you would have seen that they were making most money by selling new trucks. Not anymore. Now, sale of used trucks, service and maintenance, parts, etc., are generating more and more revenues for dealerships. And that is changing the way that the dealers interact with OEMs and with the end users. And all of these are impacting the trucking industry, right? So if you start now drawing a line between all of these 8 trends and finding out what is the most common denominator, urbanization is that denominator. We are experiencing the biggest mass migration of human beings the history of this planet has ever experienced in the form of urbanization. More and more people moving from rural areas to urban areas. Right now, global population is about 7 billion, 3.5 billion live in cities, 3.5 billion live in rural areas. By 2050, that is going to reach 10 billion, of which 7 billion will be in cities, 3 billion in rural areas. That's how fast urbanization is changing everything we know about businesses, business models, etc. Now let's break down urbanization into 2 distinct components. One, focused on the developed markets. In the developed markets, urbanization started right after the Second World War, when the boys started coming back home from war, and we put them into use in making this massive interstate highways and infrastructure. That was great. It has served us well till about now. So that spawned the rise of urbanization, quite frankly, and then by 1990, suburbanization was at its peak. And now we are seeing the creation of a new kind of city. These are called network cities or branded cities, where the core of the city contains financial institutions, high-end retail chains, and dinks and sinks, double income, no kid, single income, no kid kind of families living there, right? The outside belt of which we find majority of the population residing there, mostly middle class population residing there, and that's pretty much the population center for those cities. And the outermost belt is where we see a lot of manufacturing, warehouses, etc. And that is where a lot of road to rail, rail to road, road to marine, all those kind of transfers happen there. So what is really happening is the creation of the foundation for hub and spoke logistics, where large trucks, mega trucks bring in freight to the outer periphery of the cities, and then smaller trucks bring them in to your doorstep. Now that is in the developed world. In the developing world, urbanization has a different meaning altogether. It is not by the size of the city as much as the population of a given city. If you go to Rio in Brazil, if you go to Chennai in India, you will see a new kind of city emerging there where employers and employees tend to live very close to each other. And that's because of the kind of infrastructure constraints these cities provide, right, or offer. So you're seeing that new trend emerging where employers and employees live very close to each other, and that is resulting in the creation of what is called satellite towns, where these small towns are very well, I would say, contained in the sense that you have all facilities and everything, but within a very small perimeter. Now to serve population in those perimeters, new kinds of trucks are emerging. For example, there's a vehicle called Tata A, sub 1-ton GVWR truck. $5,000, believe it or not, is the cost to buy that truck, and designed specifically to carry 1-ton or smaller payload in densely urban areas. So that is what is the result of urbanization in emerging markets. But what it's really doing, if you combine these two worlds, thanks to urbanization, there's a common theme emerging where the end users or the citizens or people who live in these cities are demanding their services, the goods they purchase, better, faster, cheaper. And that's why we see the rise of e-commerce. In 2011, about $11.8 trillion worth of retail transactions happened, of which only 5% was on online platforms, right? By 2025, that's going to reach 23 trillion, of which 19% will be on online platforms, amounting to $4.3 trillion. That's a big jump from 5% to 19% in a span of 14 years. In fact, something fascinating happened last month when the US Commerce Department released its annual retail report. And in that report, for the month of February, the first time in the history of this planet, at least in the United States, we saw online sales marginally trump brick and mortar sales. If you exclude auto and restaurants and food retail, if you take that portion out, online sales for the first time ever has now overtaken brick and mortar sales. That's a big deal because it changes everything in our world, in the world of freight mobility. Because the moment you buy anything, anything from using an online platform, what you also buy is a promise that that box or that thing that you've purchased will be delivered to you within a given time frame, and you can now track that freight. So visibility into freight mobility is now becoming more and more the norm. And that is why companies such as ours, Fleet Complete, and others who are in the telematics space are really benefiting from this trend. And so Amazon announced one-day shipping, and I can bet you this is not where it ends. They're just getting started. Very soon you'll see 12 hours, 6 hours, eventually next hour delivery. So get ready for that. It's not very far from now. Because that is what the end user demands. But now the question is, when you have bought that freight, the idea is to get that truck where it needs to be on time every time. However, telematics can help, but telematics, the information it offers today is highly reactive, which means that it tells you, how to get there. It tells you what's wrong with the vehicle or what's right with the vehicle, but the onus is on the driver and the fleet manager now to take the last leap to make it happen. But if you add traffic predicting software, weather predicting software, ITS, social media integration into the telematics mix, all of a sudden it's now possible to get that truck on time, every time, where it needs to be. Because that's the future of retail, because if you don't do that, somebody like a Walmart is going to slap a fine on you, because they used to do that when your truck would reach their bay late. Nowadays, they are doing the same if your truck reaches the bay sooner than it's supposed to be. Just like landing a plane in an airport prior to or after the intended ETA, and how you, as a passenger or the pilot or everybody, gets punished. That's what exactly is happening in the freight world. So from a vehicle OEM perspective, what's really going on now because of these mega trends is because pre-2000, OEMs used to compete based on who had the best powertrain or who offered the best service and maintenance or whose truck was of the highest quality, if you if you compare ads in print media for various OEMs, you would see those were the differentiation parameters. Nowadays, it's more about who offers the most advanced safety technologies or who offers the best TCO, total cost of ownership. But that's not the future. In the future, that older driver on the left and the younger driver on the right will decide what OEMs will be or won't be doing. Because we, at this point of time, are witnessing the biggest exodus of truck drivers in North America. Average age of truck drivers is 48 years. They're retiring en masse. Not enough younger truck drivers joining because younger truck drivers or younger people have been taught in their schools to take their health, wellness, and well-being very seriously. And they do. And trucking is not that profession that offers some of those benefits. However, that needs to change. OEMs are aware. So a lot of R&D dollars, if you take a look at the top 4 OEMs in North America or globally, you will see most of their R&D dollars that used to go in the past to powertrain and safety technologies, these are now going inside the cabin. Better visibility, better HMI, better seating, better comfort and convenience. Okay, let me give you another example. Till about 10 years ago, in Class 8 long-haul trucks, the penetration of manual transmissions was north of 90%. Fast forward to 2019, manual transmissions are right now less than 70%. We now have automatic and semi-automatic transmissions replacing that demand within the last 10 years in a dramatic fashion. Why is that? Because a lot of older drivers are retiring, not enough young drivers joining in. That's another way of doing it. So all of these changes now require to bring the driver inside the cabin. And autonomous driving is going to help there because if the driver is not driving, then the driver can rest and relax and do other things for which he or she can be compensated. And autonomous driving can help that in that area because what our analysis tells us is the cost of autonomous driving, if you add it on top of regular trucks, is going to decline dramatically from what used to be $23,000 to $19,000. And if the driver is not driving, what else can the driver do? Find freight along the way. And that's why, digital freight platforms are now exploding because there is that demand. So the driver is not driving that vehicle. He or she can now find freight along the way and monetize that opportunity. What used to be a $5 billion industry globally, which is digital freight platforms, is going to be $55 billion, 11x over a period of 8 years because of this demographic shift that is happening in trucking. And that has an impact on TCO. We can see that driver cost, which used to be the second largest cost component of TCO, will become the biggest cost component by 2022. And that means any innovation, any advancement that happens in the industry will be focused around the truck driver in the future. We do a lot of research ourselves. When we survey our end user base, when we ask them, when you choose telematics, what is the real motivator? Why do you choose telematics? And the answer is not reducing TCO as much, not fuel efficiency, but improving safety. Why is that? 70% of our fleet base is owner-operators and small fleets. Let's say 5 vehicles. If one of the vehicles gets into an accident, 20% of capacity is wiped off right there and then. So safety is of paramount importance. So we asked our end users and our subscribers, when you use telematics data, which platform do you prefer? Vast majority of them still prefer, I would say, in-vehicle installed, but take a look at that 25% figure. That is smartphones. So a lot of these drivers that are coming into the mix now prefer to get telematics information in their smartphones. So if you don't have a smartphone interface today, you're at a disadvantage. So right now the telematics market, which is about, in 2016 was about 20 million vehicles globally, which means 20 million vehicles globally, commercial vehicles, were paying for telematics services. That is going to 3x to 63 million by 2025, which means service revenues, which were about 4.2 billion, are going to increase to almost 16 billion, 4x. So while the user base is tripling in size, the revenue base is quadrupling, which means there's a demand for platforms because more and more layered services are coming in. And our Convex platform is a platform that aggregates data from OEMs, from suppliers, from infrastructure, from financial institutions, and from fleets. And we create unique solutions based on that benefit fleets, but also OEMs, tier ones, and all the other contributors because we co-create revenue streams for them. So the real change that Convex is really enabling is from owning assets, because in the past, owning assets was considered to be the metric of success. The more assets you own, the more successful. Now we are facilitating owning of transactions. Every time that truck creates a new revenue, so opportunity for the end user or for the fleet or driver, we own those transactions. But that's not the future. The future is owning interaction. Every time that truck or the engine in the truck, the transmission in the truck the axle in that truck, the brake in that truck interacts with the world outside, we own that transaction, that interaction. And what we do with that, we'll figure out later. Right now, we are focused totally on owning as much interaction as possible between the vehicle to the world outside and the world outside to the vehicle. So really what is happening is we are seeing the tip of an iceberg right now, where in terms of driver management, order management, vehicle management, and fuel management, if you add them all together, these are revenue drivers for us. That's about $4 billion in size. What the industry doesn't see, we think that we see is a 10x size of 4 billion. That is 40 billion in size. I call them profit drivers that manifest in the form of warranty optimization, prognostics, remote diagnostics, ADAS, driver behavior and training. So eventually, the iceberg is going to rise, and all these opportunities will be available for us and for everybody in the ecosystem. So we are preparing the ecosystem for that change. So really what is going on is for us is we are trying to create unique opportunities for ourselves, and we're trying to do the best in a given space, which is fleet connectivity. Because Jerry Garcia, who's my personal hero, saying something pretty cool is, it's not enough to be the best at what you do, you have to be perceived to be the only one who does what you do. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure. Bye.